Oh, interesting. Whoa. Uh-oh. Well, we're all over the place. Okay, so remember, average level of income rises by 5%. Demand for something goes up by 20%. 20 divided by 5 is 4. Nice. So some of you just had it upside down. Okay. So that's just something I want to, the reason I did this is just to see if that might happen. Just be careful. Okay. So remember, any kind of elasticity, the money thing is on the bottom. Okay. Always put money in the denominator. So if we're talking about income elasticity, income is in the denominator. So mathematically, so the people who got 0.25, you did 5 divided by 20, which is a common mistake. 20 divided by 5 would be correct. Okay. So any kind of elasticity, remember, money goes in the denominator. Okay. In the bottom of the fraction. Okay, cool. All right, let's keep it rolling. So the answer here would have been 4. So again, this is the formula. Remember, if this said price elasticity of demand, it would be price in the bottom, right? You can usually tell what the formula is just by looking at the words. Okay. Okay. Let's try another one. So think it through, because at 8:30, the answers were actually split halfway. So really think it through. Price of a good falls. What happens with that good? And then people start buying more of some related good. So think about, there's kind of a middle step there, right? The price of a good falls, something happens, and then people are buying more of some related good. So if you can think through the process there, it's going to lead you to the correct answer. Okay. So most of you, well, I wonder what happens if I do this. Oh, interesting. Okay, most of you are saying C, compliments. Compliments is the correct answer. So for those of you who said inferior or luxury, so luxury is never going to be an answer on anything, because luxury is a type of normal good. So if the answer were luxury, I would have had to just say normal good. The reason inferior is not an answer is because we're not talking about income. If I said income fell and demand for something went up, that would be an inferior good, okay? Inferior goods have to do with income. But most of you have said compliment, and that's correct. And the reason it's compliment, think it through. Okay. Price of a good falls. What do people do when the price of a good falls? What do people do for that good when the price of a good falls? Law of demand says they'll do what? They'll buy more of it. So if something's making me buy more of the good, and then in turn I'm buying more of some related good, those two goods must be goods we buy together, complements, okay? So you can either think through the thought process like that. You can think it through, okay, if the price of peanut butter falls, quantity demanded for jelly goes up. They're complements. Price of peanut butter falls, I buy more peanut butter. If I'm buying more peanut butter, I'm buying more jelly. Complements. Or you could just remember the math, cross price elasticity of demand. If you get a negative sign, they're complements. So 2 ways of thinking about it. You could just remember the math rule. Hey, the price went down 10% and quantity demanded for the other good went up. Opposite signs gives us a negative cross price elasticity, right? So you could remember it that way, or you can just think through the intuition. 2 different ways of doing it, okay? And again, this is a slide I showed you on Wednesday. So any questions? Anybody confused? Everybody feeling good? Pretty good. Nice, nice. All right, good stuff. Okay, excellent. Okay, cool. Let's keep it rolling then. Okay, now here's a more complex one. So we're assuming that butter and margarine have equal amounts of saturated fat. Does everybody know what margarine is? Margarine's just well, I'm not going to tell you what margarine is, but you can look at the cross price elasticity and see that it's positive. It's 3. Okay. So that tells us something about their relationship if you don't already know what their relationship is. And let's say the government wants to, cut saturated fats out of American diets. And so they put a tax on butter in such a way that the butter price goes up by 10%. Knowing what you know about the way related goods interact, knowing what you know about this cross price elasticity, tell me what you think might happen. Let's see. And remember, please, when I show responses, don't get shy and delete your response that you're halfway through, because I don't know who's typing. Margarine price will go up as well. Okay, that's true. But before the margarine price, what's causing the margarine price to go up is the demand of margarine is increasing. And so an unintended consequence, well, let's see what other people are saying. Producers might make more margarine, true. Okay, you're almost there. Increases more Americans eat margarine. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. There's substitutes. Yep. Demand for margarine goes up, which means that the quantity demanded would go up. The equilibrium quantity of margarine that's consumed by people would go up. Now let's see. Did anybody actually do the math? Thank you. Very nice. We'll be careful. We don't really know what would happen to the margarine price. That's not what cross price elasticity tells us. So the price of butter went up 10%. And the cross price elasticity between them is 3. So can anybody think of maybe the math? Market people are still consuming saturated. This is all good. These are all pretty correct. Yeah. Yep. How much will quantity demanded for margarine go up? Ooh. Not 33.3. You're close. 30. Exactly. It'll go up 30%, right? If the cross price elasticity is 3, okay, the price of butter goes up by 10%, then that's just multiplied by 3 to see what happens to the quantity demanded for margarine. So the quantity demanded of margarine would go up by 30%. Okay, so we'd see a lot more people eating margarine. Okay, so that would be the unintended consequence. Okay, so we're just applying, several different concepts that we've been doing. Good. Yes, if it's positive, they are substitutes. Absolutely. Illegal butter trade, maybe. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, excellent. Any questions? All right. Here's another one. So in 1973, this really happened. OPEC is it the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries? I forget what the O stands for. Something, probably organization, but petroleum exporting countries. So it's like 13 countries located, generally speaking, in the Middle East, Northeast Africa, that area, that control a lot of the world's oil reserves. And so in 1973, they cut off their oil exports to the US for 6 months. Knowing what we know about how elasticity changes, demand elasticity changes over time, one of these graphs does a better job of illustrating what would kind of happen in the short run, whereas the other graph illustrates what might happen in the long run. So let's see. Ooh, we're kind of split. Got any more opinions? Oh, now I wonder, that's interesting. I wonder how much of a behavioral effect there is, because you're seeing that A is the majority. So you're going with A. So A is correct. Okay. The reason A is correct, think back to what we talked about on Wednesday. In the long run, so let's just think about it graphically, right? In the long run, people can find substitutes for oil. So over time, their homes are becoming better insulated. Vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient. You can, buy, it takes time to get to the point where you're ready to buy a new car in the first place, right? And so notice that at first, the quantity demanded barely changes and the price goes up by a lot. But over time, people find substitutes and the price may actually come back down to its original level, close to its original level, as people substitute away from the expensive oil, okay? And so this is kind of a simplified, loosely historical example, right? So like OPEC cuts the oil to the US, and at the time, the price was $12 a barrel, 17.3 million barrels were consumed every day. They cut the supply. We start consuming 16 million barrels a day and paying $25 a barrel, right? Over time, we start adjusting away from that. We find better ways to use to use oil and conserve energy, right? And so we start conserving, we find better ways, we insulate our homes better. And by 1983, the economy is much bigger. It's 10 years of economic growth, much bigger economy. And yet we're using even less oil than we were in 1973 or 1975. Why is that? Because over time, even though the economy is growing, we're substituting away from oil because it's expensive. We're finding cheaper ways to heat our homes and keep the heat in, right? Putting better insulation in the walls. Cars are getting better MPGs, right? And so in the long run, prices can come back to closer to their original levels because the demand curve is flatter in the long run. And so what we noticed in the graph is that the long run analysis has the price a lot lower than the original short run analysis, okay? So any questions about that? This is kind of a wrap up for module 7. And so we've covered pretty much everything I really want to cover in module 7. We've covered cross price elasticity, income elasticity, the different kinds of price elasticity. Are there any questions? Maybe if anybody has any questions and you don't want to raise your hand, you can type something in or not. Nothing? All right. I guess there's no questions. Okay, cool. Okay, so here's the thing. I need to figure something out because the problem is you have, as the schedule says, there's a quiz on module 7 and 8 next Friday. But module 8 is like not enough to spend 3 days lecturing on. It's so it's not very much stuff at all. And module 9 is really interesting and important. So I'm going to have to talk to my supervisor about figuring something out because I don't plan to spend a lot of time on module 8. And I've already spent some time. A lot of these concepts were just rehashing ones we've already done. We'll spend a little bit of time on module 8 though today. And if you have any questions about module 8, you're more than welcome to ask them anytime over the next week. Okay.
Cancel class.
What?
Cancel class.
Oh, cancel class. I mean, it just doesn't look good for me as a junior faculty member. You know what I mean? Believe me, I it wouldn't be the end of the world, but yeah. So I want you to think back to a couple of weeks ago, and this is a lecture I sent out to everybody. What's funny is I put an extra credit opportunity at the literal first minute of that lecture recording, and only one person emailed me about it after the fact, which means that most people did not watch the lecture recording. If you were in class, you also did the extra credit. I know you did it. It was the one that I did in class where I let everybody take a little quiz. But that's why I sent the lecture recording to everybody. So even if you weren't in class, you could still do the extra credit, but only one person must have watched it. So, think back to this lecture, prices contain information. So I talked a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how if if a fire knocks out a bunch of lumber on the other end of the world and reduces the amount of lumber, wood that we can use to build stuff, you don't need to know that a fire knocked out a bunch of lumber. You just see that the price goes up, and so you conserve lumber, right? If you're a construction company, you find substitutes, you purchase less of it. And if you're a supplier, you try to find ways to supply it to the market. I talked about if there was some kind of drought that knocks out a bunch of coffee bean farms in Brazil. Prices of coffee go up in the United States. In response, we use less coffee. We conserve this thing that has had a disaster has hurt the supply. And not even knowing that a disaster has hurt the supply, we don't need to tell people, hey, you got to start conserving coffee beans. People just see that the price goes up, so they consume less. And the people who value it the most still buy it at the higher price. And if you're a producer, if you're a farmer, you're more incentivized to try to grow coffee beans if you can. So prices can help coordinate people's actions in responses to changes in supply and demand. If something is very abundant, it's probably very cheap. And so we can all get it and consume as much as we want. But if something becomes more expensive, we start, taking time. Like what if Walmart had raised the price of toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic? People would not have been stacking their carts 6 feet high with toilet paper. They would have had to make better decisions about trying to be more frugal and economical with their purchasing, right? So prices can help coordinate. And so if prices are too low, you might get a shortage, right? That's the bottom line, okay? So are there any questions about that? Again, so like this comes up in module 8, and it's just, I spent, a whole lecture on it a couple weeks ago. And again, the lecture recording's up, the slides are up. So any questions? Because on the next slide, I want you to think of an example. So let's try this. So thinking of like the example I did, I talked about the coffee beans, I talked about the lumber, I even talked about marijuana legalization, how the fact that it's illegal is baked into the price in West Virginia. It's more expensive in West Virginia than it is in Colorado because it's illegal, right? So maybe give me an example of how something you can think of how prices might convey some information, or prices might help coordinate people's actions. Just think of something. Four people. 5, 8, nice. All right. We're getting there. 10, all right. I hear some typing. Anybody doing anything fun this weekend? Homework. Jeez. Not for me. Not my homework, right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. What's your major? Oh, hell yeah, man. Nice. All right. 13. That's unlucky. I was going to say, is it Friday the 13th? I guess it's Friday the 12th. We just missed it. 13 out of 47. Come on, folks. All right. Prices of tanker, a huge truck goes up, making people seem not that interested, making that the earth is a lot clean. Okay. So I'm not really sure. Well, yeah, I mean, if the prices of big trucks goes up, then there'd be less big trucks moving around, I guess. It certainly incentivizes people like Elon Musk to come up with a self-driving truck, right? Maybe one that's more fuel efficient. If the price of produce goes down, okay, interesting. Yeah, so like if the price of produce goes down, it means something has happened. Either it's less desirable to people or it's more abundant. So there's more to go around. So if the price of produce goes down, it's people are more incentivized to give that kind of stuff away, right? people are not very incentivized to give away hand sanitizer at the beginning of the pandemic because it's so valuable and rare. But if the price of something goes down, it must be more abundant. So they're more likely to give it away. Price of healthy food goes down, which incentivizes people to get less product. Okay. So it would be good to find a way though, because the problem is healthy food is, kind of expensive, right? Because it's more desirable. Let's see. The government pays medical companies to sell insulin at cheaper prices. This less consumer. So I guess the question I ask is too broad because these are all very interesting answers. So what you're talking about here is a subsidy. The government pays medical companies to sell insulin at cheaper prices. That's actually not prices acting on their own to coordinate people. That's actually a third party getting involved. And so this would be an example of government intervention, which we're going to talk about. Okay, let's think. People mentioned SIG taxes at 8:30. I'm trying to think how I can. So nothing here is wrong, but I want to really drive this point home. We have to think of how changes in supply and demand are going to coordinate people's actions. So it's not just we're increasing the price of soda to get people to buy less soda. It's like if something happens to the soda supply line that reduces the supply of soda somehow, the idea is that no single person has to know that something happened to the soda supply line to cut the supply. Nobody has to know. All you have to know is the price. So the point of this module, the point of this section, is they're trying to teach you about the fact that no one has all the information. No single person, no single mind, no single computer has all the information needed to figure out how much stuff needs to be produced and for what price it needs to be produced at. Nobody knows. But millions of people interacting do a pretty good job of figuring it out. And so if, a soda factory blows up, or let's say an ingredient used in in soda production, Freudian slip there, I called it sugar production. In soda production, like high fructose corn syrup. Let's say that something happens to damage all the corn supply in the United States. So it's harder to produce soda. A few things would happen to coordinate people's actions. One is that the price of soda will go up. So people will start saving soda. They won't consume as much. There's less of it to go around. People will start being smarter about their consumption. The other thing is suppliers will find substitutes for corn syrup. They'll start substituting to sugar, which means the price of sugar will go up. But if the price of sugar goes up, consumers are going to buy less sugar. And so there will be more sugar for the companies to buy. And the other thing is suppliers will be more incentivized to grow sugar in the first place. So the idea I'm trying to get across is that whenever something happens to supply and demand, it changes the price in such a way that it coordinates people's actions across the world. And no one needs to know what happened to supply or demand to be able to just view the price on the shelf and react. That's the idea. Okay. And I know that that's kind of, okay, see, this is a good point. So if there was a lack of sugar supply, the price of stevia would go up because stevia is a substitute. So the price of stevia goes up because there's a lack of sugar going around. And so what happens is people are more incentivized to produce stevia because there's money to be made. And people are less likely to buy all the stevia off the shelf. The producers who value the stevia quite a bit because they want to put it in their soda or whatnot, their diet soda, they're going to be more easily able to get it because they're willing to pay more. Okay. So I know this is kind of a complex topic. So does anybody have any questions? Like, does anybody want me to, again, I had this, I gave this pretty detailed presentation on this a couple weeks ago, and today it's not as polished. So I just want to make sure nobody's confused because this is kind of an important topic to understand. So let's see. The kind of question you'd be asked on the quiz like this might be something like, you could be asked something like, how does, well, let's go to Top Hat. Let's see what Top Hat asks. That would be good to do. So let's see if there's any Top Hat questions about this. Tennis code, minimize and keep open, markets. Pricing and coordination. Here we go. Let's see a good one. Yeah, so this is kind of a good one. It's like rising oil prices during the 1970s shifted flour production from California to Kenya. Which of the following explains this shift? It's that markets are linked to one another, right? So it's like the rising oil prices made it more expensive to produce flowers in California for some reason. And so it moved to where it could be produced more cheaply in Kenya. Another example would be like, let's see. So it's like, a decrease in the demand for a good sold in market A might affect other markets somewhere around the world. Okay. Let's see. Exactly. So these kinds of questions, right? It's like international demand for diamonds for industrial and other purposes, such as jewelry, has led to the production of synthetic diamonds by other countries, such as the United States. Okay. So the best diamonds are in South Africa, right? But other countries produce synthetic ones. Why? Because the desire pushes the price up, which creates incentives for sellers. Okay. So this kind of stuff. Here's a good one. Ethanol and sugar are both made from sugarcane. Ethanol can be used as a fuel substitute for oil. Increasing oil prices causes the demand for ethanol to increase. And so these are the kind of questions you might get asked, trying to link these things, talking about how prices of one good might affect another. Again, that's why I'm kind of saying I don't want to spend too much time on module 8 because it's like we kind of already have done this and we're just kind of saying it in a different way. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions. As the weather gets colder, the supply of certain fruits and veggies drop, raising the price of these goods. Okay, exactly. So this is a really good point. As the weather gets colder, it becomes harder to grow certain things. And so what do you have to do? You have to pay extra money to get it transported from places where the weather's still good. Right? So up here, when it's cold out, you can't grow certain things. And so what do? You get it transported from elsewhere where it's warmer. But the fact that the price went up causes us to conserve it. We don't consume as much. We're not buying corn on the cob in the middle of winter. We're not buying watermelon in the middle of winter. We could, we just have to pay a lot of money for it. We're buying it during the summer because not literally because it's abundant, not literally because there's more corn, more watermelon, more stuff like that to go around in the summer, but because the price is lower. I don't need to know anything about the production process of watermelon or corn on the cob. I just know that it's cheaper in the summer, and so I buy more of it in the summer. So that's the bottom line with this kind of stuff, okay? Exactly, the winter strawberries suck, exactly. Probably because, so either they're grown in non-ideal conditions or because they're grown far away and it takes time to get them to you, okay? Okay, cool. Let's keep it rolling. So again, the main takeaways from module 8 are that prices convey information and they coordinate people's actions. Generally, economists agree that markets, people acting individually, are generally pretty good. Not necessarily in every single case, because we're going to talk about market failure in a couple modules from now, but markets are pretty good at directing production processes and prices. And so the bottom line is that no central planner can properly figure out how much stuff to produce and what the price should be. Okay. It's the product of millions of people interacting across the world. And prices do a pretty good job of reflecting how abundant something is, how scarce something is, how desirable something is, etc. How hard it is to produce it, right? Any questions? All right, let's keep going. So here's the problem. I really want to get into module 9 because it's really interesting. It's very pertinent. It talks about stuff that you hear about every day. Because we're going to talk about rent controls and we're going to talk about minimum wage. The economic term for those, a rent control is a type of price ceiling. Minimum wage is a type of price floor. I really want to get to this material. We're not going to jump right into module 9 today, but I'd like to jump into module 9 on Monday. And so the question is, how should I handle the fact that next Friday's quiz is supposed to be on module 7 and 8? Do you think I should do 7, 8, and 9? It would be the same number of questions. It would just be not many from module 8. You know, it'd be the same number of questions as usual, 25 to 30. Or do you think you're okay with going through module 9 next week and just not having it covered on the quiz next Friday until the following couple weeks later? So that there's, you know, let me know what you think, because we can talk about it. So please give me your opinion. The problem with giving you a quiz on Monday is it wouldn't have, like, it's been in the schedule that it's going to be next Friday, and it would probably be unethical of me to give you a quiz Monday if you're not without a week's notice. You're really supposed to give a week's notice for any kind of assessment. Don't teach us module 9 if it's not going to be on the test next week. The problem is I'm going to be wasting my breath just talking about module 8 for a week.
Can we do like a Kahoot?
What's that?
Can we do a Kahoot or something just to like a review type deal? At least on Wednesday. That way we could cover 7 and 8, but just kind of independently to see what our understanding is. That, if we do that on Monday, we'll cover the misunderstandings on Wednesday.
It's not a bad idea. Yes.
Not as much, but maybe not more than that. I don't really see it as bad. It's not that much.
Well, let's see. The problem is, guys, I hate the way this textbook is organized. It's absolutely bizarre the way they organize, because they're hitting you with price controls, but we did disequilibrium in like module 4. And so it's kind of, let me look exactly how the top hat is set up. Externalities. So the thing is, like, there's no reason really to, like, you don't need, module 9 and 10 don't go together. You know what I mean? But module 7, 8, 9 kind of do. The other thing that's kind of weird though is, like, we went up to module 6. Module 7 is also on elasticity, but that's its own, but that's a separate quiz. Yes. No, we'd just be ahead of schedule, and I can get you to stuff that, like, for example, cost and industry structure is an addendum. This is standard. Anywhere I've ever, when I took principles of micro, everyone I've ever tutored in principles of micro, this is not extra material. This is standard material to teach you, because it prepares you for your business majors. This is important. But in this textbook, it's an addendum, which is kind of bizarre. I want to get to this. So we would just get to material that Yeah, that's the idea. We wouldn't spend 2 weeks on anything. We would just get to material like that that I think is important. The other thing is externalities is 4 sections. Perfect competition is 4 sections. Right. And so see, then we get to 2 sections and then we get to 3. And this is all good stuff. Wait, let's see what else people are thinking. Having the quiz on mod 7, 8, and 9 and Friday. I think teaching module 9 will not be a problem. Okay. Here's what we'll do then. Since we're kind of ahead of schedule, since it's not that big of a deal, I'll do what I planned on doing on Monday, which is we're going to get into module 9. I'll give you on Monday, we'll just talk about minimum wage. Because that is an excellent topic. It's extremely hot right now. We could spend all class talking about the economics of minimum wage. Wednesday, we'll recap 7 and 8. So here's what we'll do. Tell me what you think, but I still have one more slide for you folks. I apologize for holding you up so long. So don't leave just yet. Minimum wage on Monday, review 7 and 8 on Wednesday to prepare you for the quiz that's next Friday. And then the following week, we'll do all of module 9 for real with the whole, all price control, rent control, all that stuff. That's what we'll do. Okay. I mean, cool. So that leads me to then, in this case, that leads me to my plan. I want to see this. First, I want to gauge responses. Interesting. I wonder if this would be interesting. I bet business major opinion is different than like we went to like a sociology department and asked. Interesting. We got a lot of strong opinions. Okay. So in that vein, here's what we're going to do. So I think we're going to have a very interesting class on Monday because I think Monday's class, and I'm not going to try to convince you one way or another. Monday's class, we're going to talk about how economists view this and how we can become better informed about, what the minimum wage is and isn't, what it might or might not do. And so in that vein, I would like you to become acquainted with the modern debate on either $15 federal minimum wage or rent control in US cities. Now, this is not a graded requirement, okay? Because if it were, it would have been on the schedule. And I don't want to deviate from the schedule. But if you have under a 75, just like the stimulus checks, if you're under a certain threshold, I'd be willing to throw you a few bonus points if you come prepared with something interesting on Monday. So if you don't mind to make our class discussion on Monday kind of interesting, maybe we can have a little bit of debate. Become acquainted with the costs and benefits of minimum wage. Maybe look into some research. Maybe look at what some economists have to say. Try to avoid partisan news sources. Look at what the actual economic research says, because there are costs and benefits, just like with anything. There's pros and cons to minimum wage. There's pros and cons to rent control. And we're going to talk about them on Monday. So enjoy your weekends. Be good. As always, if you can't be good, be safe.